a motion.
I move approval to reconvene in open session.
Second.
Roll call vote, Rochelle? Aye. Susan? Elizabeth?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Peter?
Okay, before,
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried. All right, order of business. We have public appearances today. So just as a reminder, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each with a total time of 15 minutes. And
the audio,
it's in Word doc. All right, first one is Robin Jones.
Getting feedback. My name is Robin Jones, and I have been an educator for 27 years. This is my 20th year in Monona Grove School District. When I first started my career in education, I was lucky enough to start as an educational assistant in the Verona Area School District. Fast forward 27 years, the role of an EA and SEA has changed drastically. They are still the connectors. They are emotional supports for both students and staff. They are integral parts of our classrooms. Now, though, they're also defenders of the safety of other students and staff. They are shifted and rearranged sometimes daily. They are sometimes the only ones that students can connect to and are looking for daily hugs, affirmations, and smiles, all while trying to figure out where they should be next according to their schedule. As a classroom teacher, the people who work in my room are just as important as I am. We are serving our students, all of them. We consult on seating charts, partnerships, groups, scaffold, and differentiation for our students. We keep each other going during extremely tough days and celebrate the joys of accomplishments of our students. So when I heard that negotiations were struggling, I did what I have my students do. I looked, leaned, and listened to our EAs and SEAs at Winnequa. Let's break down that $1.47. 25 cents. That is for Cindy and Kay, who have served in the trenches with our teachers for a combined 51 years in the district, who have given out hugs and performed holds to the same child in one day, who have created relationships with students who are now parents of students. This is for Chris, Danielle, and Tierney, whose schedules change almost daily to cover absent assistants or new students who have joined our Winnequa family, and the shuffle begins. Did you know Winnequa is in need of 3 more SEAs? Recently, we welcomed 6 new students, 2 of which require full-time SEAs. Families want to live in our district because of all of our staff. This is for Zoe and Morgan, who are 2 women I don't think I could have survived last year without. From bouncing ideas off and working together collaboratively to help all students in my classroom, these 2 are who I want to be when I grow up. This is for Amy, Babette, and Pete, who jump in whenever and wherever needed. They handle themselves like all of our assistants with professional air and calm manner. They, like other SEAs, work with our most challenging students. If not, it is not out of the ordinary for our SEAs to get hit, kicked, or sworn at a daily basis. And yet they arrive the next morning ready for a new day with a smile on their face. This is for Sherry and Leslie, who go from classroom to classroom supporting one-on-one students, and Hannah, who works with us students solely. Leslie and Sherry are 2 educational assistants who left Winnequa and came back to us. This is for Michelle, Megan, Lexi, and Lisa, who help with snack delivery for our students in the morning and trade that hat for recess, lunchroom, 4K, library, and more duties. They are connecting with a wide variety of students daily and making an impact. This is for Ryan, Linda, and Annie, who weather the cold, heat, rain, snow. Can we talk hazard pay? Who watch our students and help solve recess problems, start a fair game of kickball, and push a group of students on a spinny thing. And here are my 2 cents. There are 31 grade level teachers at Winnequa, plus many more specialists. There are 635 students. There are 20 assistants with a need for 3 more. Let's get our SEAs and EAs above the poverty and free and reduced lunch level. Let's show them that we support and value their work and efforts with our students. Let's be a leader in our community and not just attract and retain teachers, but all staff. Let's make a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Next is Dawn.
Good evening. My name is Dawn Peterson, and I'm from Cottage Grove. I'm here as a parent and an advocate for my son Cole, who had to find a seat in the other room. He is a 12-year-old student in this district and on the autism spectrum. I want to share with you the invaluable role that the MGSD paras play in Cole's education. I worry if my children are going to sit alone in the lunchroom or how that math test will go today. But I also have to worry, for example, if Cole will run away from school because of an overwhelming situation. One thing that eases my concerns is this sketchbook. And moreover, the amazing para behind it who has kept Cole at school on days he may have otherwise gone actually missing. Day after day, she would bring Cole's imagination to life in these sketches, like when he wondered what a Stegosaurus dinosaur would look like with cow spots. It's Cole's bond with her, and in his words, that made it okay to go to school and made it possible to learn. So it's essential that we recognize that almost 90% of these dedicated professionals earn less than $30,000 a year. For reference, that is the federal poverty level for a family of 4 and qualifies for free school lunch for a family of 4. The average starting pay for our paras is shockingly 12 to 13% below that of neighboring districts. School districts struggle to recruit and retain paras. However, neighboring districts have taken steps to increase pay for their paras, directly impacting retention. While starting hiring bonuses may initially attract individuals to a position, they do not provide a sustainable cost of living wage. As a result, we witness turnover within our district that disrupts continuity for our students. For Cole, it has taken consistent relationships with caring paras for him to learn. This vicious turnover cycle can be broken by compensating our paras fairly and competitively. I strongly urge the board to consider a $3 per hour raise for our MGSD paraprofessionals. This raise is an investment in our children's education and brings their salaries in line with counterparts in neighboring districts. Addressing this pay disparity sends a clear message of our appreciation for their dedication, ensures educational stability, and secures a brighter future for all of our students, including Cole. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Dawn. Next is Laura Solinger.
Evening. I'm a parent also. I'm here to support the increase for the EAs and SEAs. My daughter's been in the district since she was 3, an early childhood program. She's now a sophomore in high school. She has always required one-on-one support to get through her day. As we heard previously, it has been the amazing talent and creativity of her teacher aide teams that has kept her in school, which is no small feat. We've been lucky enough to have paras that were creative and had unending endurance and patience. My sister's on this, my daughter's on the spectrum. She has global developmental delays. She has many needs. She needs self-care. She needs behavioral support, emotional support. When she gets frustrated and doesn't feel understood, she gets aggressive. So she is one of those students that has hit people. She can't always express her needs. So it takes a long time to build up that trust that she needs with somebody, that consistency that's so important. We've been lucky enough to have some consistency in the past, which was amazing for her. She knew she could trust these people. She could not go to school without that. And I know that for a fact because last year she couldn't always go to school. I had to keep her home, I don't know how many times, because we had lost a couple of aides last year because they had to leave. One left to go to the Madison School District because it paid more. The other one left the field completely because she couldn't, they were the sole income earners in their home. It made me very aware that in the past, when we had that consistency with her paras, they were often married. They weren't the sole income earners. They had the luxury, I guess you could say, to stay at the job. I think it was, let me see, I was going to say, I had to keep her home, I don't know how many days, and I had to be the volunteer there often. They did call in, technically, there were other staff, generous teachers that gave up their planning periods to be there, but they couldn't step into this job. It's not just a job you just step into. It's a skilled position. So that really didn't do her any good, according to our teacher, who didn't think it would be safe for her to be there, and she wouldn't be engaged anyway. I just wanted to point that out, that people shouldn't have to take a vow of poverty or be married in order to survive at this job. Please consider getting closer to a living wage for the paras in our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next is Tracy Ellingson. Thank you.
I should do this first. My name is Tracy Ellingson. I'm speaking to you tonight in favor of honoring the proposal from the MGEA to provide a $3 an hour increase to all SEAs and EAs. They all work so incredibly hard and deserve to be paid a decent wage. The district's budget is about priorities. We are here tonight asking you to prioritize some of your lowest paid employees. If the district can find the resources to fill a talent acquisition specialist position and institute hiring bonuses, you can find ways to pay all employees a living wage. During my 25 years at MG as a special ed teacher, I've had the privilege of working with the most talented and professional education assistants. We are blessed with the very best. The love and dedication they bring to school every day is a valuable asset that this district can't afford to lose. We can't risk losing anymore because of extremely low pay. Over my 31 years of being a special ed teacher, the para roles have changed drastically. Paras play such a critical role in the success of our students. With our new service delivery model, students with special education needs are spread out into many classes. My caseload is typically spread into 4 or 5 classrooms. I can't possibly be in every class to cover the needs of all my students. Our paras go into those classrooms and are expected to do my job while they are in there. Their responsibilities are endless and are constantly changing. Our paras also work with students who have some of the most challenging behaviors. They constantly try to de-escalate students who are experiencing emotional dysregulation using the techniques from NVCI. Even with the training, they often get kicked, pinched, and spat on multiple times a day, and yet they still show up every day and offer their love and understanding to our children. Our paras are also in charge of the personal care needs of some students. Some examples are toileting, diapering, feeding, and performing medical procedures like tube feeding, administrating emergency medication, and taking care of a colostomy bag. The paras that I have worked with go so far above and beyond their duties. I've had paras go on field trips that extended beyond the school day, and some even stayed overnight. I've had paras attend conferences and IEP meetings after school hours. During COVID, our paras had to switch online too in the drop of a hat. They would have to meet with students one-on-one on many occasions. They had to learn how to navigate technology just like we did. One of my paras would even spend extra time with a student playing games and actually baking with them. I also had a parent during COVID deliver end-of-the-year gifts to all students with me. I had a parent last summer work at Culver's with a student when the district told the mother they couldn't find support. I also see so many of our paras attending extracurricular activities, events for students. Paras have bought or brought in many items for our students. One parent also learned Braille so she could work with a student who is blind. The list goes on and how they continuously go above and beyond. While the list of responsibilities is endless, it is important to note that they all demonstrate a high degree of flexibility each day in terms of the way they respond to students' ever-evolving needs. Without the committed support of our paras, I would not be able to meet the diverse range of needs I have on my caseload. I'm sorry. I value them as professionals and appreciate all the things they do to contribute to our school community. They are my brain, heart, eyes, and ears when I can't be there. They are my true heroes. Please give them respect they deserve with the $3 an hour raise. I cannot do my job without them. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Next is David Whitty.
Good evening. Thank you for the time that you provided public speakers tonight. My name is Dave Whitty, and I live at 5802 Winnequa Road. I'm here tonight to support all of our educators in the Monona Grove School District, but especially the paraprofessionals that not only deserve, but have earned a minimum of a $3 raise, if not higher, for the love and support that they provide our students each and every day. To be honest, I can't believe that I'm sitting here. I never in a million years thought that I'd be back in Monona Grove. But my family moved to Monona in 2020, and we moved to Monona for only one reason, the Monona Grove School District. I have a 9th grader, an 8th grader, and a 5th grader. And before we moved to Monona, we were very happy living in Madison, even though I am a Monona Grove alumni. We had 13 years of wonderful memories in our first house, and that was where our friends lived, our daughter's friends lived, and we were part of the community and proud of it. Overall, we were very happy. We still have very fond memories of our little house, the house that we brought home our 3 girls from the hospital, and to be honest, we would still be there because nothing needed to change. At least that was what we thought until January 4th, 2020. This is a picture of my daughter, Olivia Whitty. This is her first grade picture. On January 4th, 2020, during Olivia's first grade IEP meeting, everything changed. My wife and I learned that Olivia was not safe at school and was not learning like we knew she could. Whose fault was it, you may ask? Because, of course, during these situations, it is natural to search and find someone to blame because you just found out that your first grade daughter with Down syndrome has been walking the school hallways by herself, leaving the classroom without permission, hiding in the boys' bathroom, or walking up 3 flights of stairs and hiding in the library alone because there were not enough special assistants to keep eyes on her and work with her in the classroom. Now, let me be clear. I can tell you that these events and situations were not the fault of Olivia's teachers, the SEAs, the EAs, or anyone at her school. It was not even the fault of her principal, who oftentimes takes the blame for everything. Because I can assure you that everyone at that school was working their rear ends off, and they still cannot keep my first grade daughter safe. I don't like to place blame because oftentimes placing blame only upsets one group or another, and sometimes the group that gets the most upset holds all the power. But what I do know is that history is about to repeat itself in the Monona Grove School District. In my daughter's former district, the leaders in the central office and the school board were very, very, very slow to respond to the school's desperate pleas that their schools were in crisis. And I don't use that word lightly. The schools were in crisis. And I truly believe that the problems that have previously shared could be avoided and could have been avoided, as I hope the Monona Grove School District, central office leaders, and elected school board officials will do so by agreeing to pay the support staff and paraprofessionals the hourly wage that they not only deserve, but the hourly wage that will keep them coming back to our schools each and every day. If our district and our schools continue to lose education assistants, support staff, and other paraprofessionals, we will also lose the wonderful teachers, because I can tell you they are already thinking about leaving because they just can't handle it anymore. This would create a situation that I never thought would exist in the Monona Grove School District, a school community where our students are not safe and are not achieving their academic and emotional goals that we know they need, deserve, and it is what we expect.
Time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just would ask you to seriously consider making sure that our paraprofessionals do receive the raise that they deserve.
David, hang on. Question for you, just so I understand your experience and that you just explained. When you were referencing the school that your daughter was in, was that the Madison School District and not the Monona Grove School District that she's in now?
She is currently in the Monona School District. She's had a wonderful experience at Winnequa Elementary. The leadership, the teachers, and the paraprofessionals have done a terrific job in her transition from her previous school district to the Monona Grove School District.
And your concerns is you don't want what happened previously to happen again to her here.
Well, I don't want it to not happen to my daughter. I don't want it to happen to all the students here. I cannot tell you the amount. As a former employee of the Madison Metropolitan School District, working in the special education department, I cannot tell you the amount of pleas by teachers, principals, staff, to the central office, to the board members, to please do something so they would not keep losing SEAs, substitute teachers, in and out. It was a revolving door. And that's what I understand Monona Grove School District is about to begin. My daughter deserves better than that. And I ask you to figure out a way to make sure that the SEAs that support her each and every day are there tomorrow and the next day and for the rest of this year. Because it's not about pats or on the back or thanks. It's about paying them what they deserve. It's about money. And that's what they deserve. So thank you.
Thank you, David.
Well, and Lorraine, I have a question. Lorraine, I have a question. David, just 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to just briefly explain to the board your educational background so that they understand that not only what you're bringing tonight is about your children and the students, but your background in understanding what those needs are?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I've been an educator for 22 years. I started as an SCA at Senate Middle School right out of college. And then I taught for 5 years before I became an assistant principal in McFarland at the middle school. I then became the principal at McFarland Middle School for 5 years. After that, I transitioned into the director of student services for McFarland for 5 years. I had the opportunity to hire an excellent school psychologist, Elizabeth Cook, for multiple years that she would work there. And then after my 5 years as the director of student services in McFarland, I transitioned and worked as the assistant director of student services and special education for the Madison Metropolitan School District. So it's not only, an advocate as a parent and a father for my daughter, but one who was living and saw what was going on. And to be honest, I couldn't do anything when I was working in Madison. And I just don't want that to occur here because the teachers in Madison, the staff in Madison are fabulous. They just did not have enough. And that's the problem. Does that answer?
Thank you, David. Ariel Brock.
Hello, good evening. My name is Ariel Breath, and I'm here to ask the board to give the paraprofessionals of Monona Grove School District a living wage and increase their hourly pay by $3. I have been a parent in the district for 12 years, and I have 2 children currently enrolled. Since my time is limited, I'm going to focus on one experience we've had with a special education assistant, but I assure you there are many others that have been positively impactful. My son Josh is on the autism spectrum. He has trouble making friends and struggles to connect with others socially. For a long time, he rarely talked about school, and when he did, it was rarely positive. He has learning challenges and behavior challenges and social challenges. So he has needed quite a lot of help along the way, including one-on-one help during the day. Thankfully, over the last few years, he's had a relatively consistent team to support him, including several paraprofessionals who have provided the extra support he needs to get through each day in school. One in particular, Mr. Veith, was with Josh for 3 years, including just over a year during the pandemic. He spent around 1 to 2 hours each school day online with us, my son and I, doing whatever he could to keep my son engaged and on track with his work. Mr. Veith would give Josh breaks when he sensed that they were needed. When his attention would wane, he would crack jokes. And if Josh was struggling, he'd have a multitude of conversations about Pokemon, dragons, and what he had for lunch, why we couldn't go back to school, and could he come over and play outside because he was bored. After the students were allowed to return to the buildings, Mr. Veith continued to be on Josh's support team. Josh would come home and talk about his day at school. Finally, slowly but surely, I saw changes. More often than not, the things that he'd learned, the things that he'd done that day, the things that excited him were done with the paras. He began to get excited about going to school so he could work with one of the EAs or SEAs. He began to talk about them like they were one of the family. He would search out these paras to tell them about his weekend or show them something he'd learned. And even after moving to middle school, he still talks about them almost every day. He wants to make them proud, and he wants them to know that they have made an indelible impression on them. These paras spend their days making sure the kids in our district who need support the most not only get that support, but get the best possible educational experience that they can, both in and out of the classroom. They meet students where they are and nurture their confidence in their own skills. All of this dedication, energy, skill, and guidance is worth more than a wage below the federal poverty level. A store manager at Quick Trip averages a $43,000 annual salary with profit sharing to boot. This is an essential job, to be sure, but no manager at Quick Trip has ever hugged my child when he was being bullied or called stupid because he wasn't as good as reading as the rest of the class. These paraprofessionals are committed wholeheartedly to the education and success of our children. They deserve better, starting with the requested $3 hourly increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariel. Next is Lisa Sutter.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Sutter. I am proud to have been a teacher in the Monona Grove School District for 27 years. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the outstanding educational assistants and special educational assistants that I have worked with, continue to work with, and will work with in the future. We need to do better by them and pay them at a rate that is above the level of poverty. They make our jobs possible. They help students in ways that are innumerable and absolutely essential. I was reminiscing about all these amazing people that I've partnered with for over 27 years, and it brought a smile to my face. I started digging through yearbooks to bring all their names to you, but I simply can't list all of them with only 3 minutes of speaking time. I'll leave you with 2 stories that illustrate their skill and value. A few years ago, I was blessed to work with a blind student. He and I worked with 2 paraprofessionals, Lisa Steffel and Kay Brzezinski. Kay is now retired, but Lisa is still working her magic with this student. In my first grade classroom, they provided constant modifications for him. They thought of everything that I didn't know, working with a visually impaired student. They were experts at Braille and learned new technologies as they became appropriate for him. I know he's still thriving at Granite Ridge, due in large part to the necessary assistance from his paras. Teaching is a wonderful job, but it is a difficult job. Paras have always made the load lighter for me as a teacher and enriched the experience for my students. This year, I have several students with support required by their IEPs. The group of paras at Cottage Grove School that have given those students support this year are vitally important. With them, I am able to better meet all learners' needs. I'm only one person, and my 21 young learners have needs that span a huge range. I can't imagine doing my best without the support of these outstanding professionals. Teachers and paras work together as partners to educate our learners. As a teacher, I fully support providing a living wage increase to our support staff. I also can't imagine the lack of respect that will show if we don't do better for them. They deserve, at the very least, a pay increase that gets them to above the poverty level. Please do all you can to appreciate, compensate, and ultimately keep them. We need them, and most importantly, our students need them. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Thank you, Lisa. Next is Lisa Gunma.
Hi, I'm Lisa Gunlock, and it's really nice to see all of you, and I thank you for your time. Yes, I'm here to advocate for myself and my family, but importantly, I am here on behalf of all of the hardworking, caring, and very patient EAs and SEAs to ask for a $3 an hour increase. Honestly, it feels kind of heavy to share this heavy weight to share the message of how we need this, as this can be life-changing for some of us. This is my third year at Winnequa as an EA. I'm 50%. I work every afternoon serving 4K through second grade in the library. I'm also a mom of a first and third grader. I work as a fundraising consultant in the mornings, and my husband works full-time. When I accepted this job, we knew it would mean living paycheck to paycheck, and often, every month, we're in the red. We are privileged to have a savings account. We regularly dip into it. Just last week, we needed a hot water heater repair, and that cost 1 week of my salary, of my pay from school. We actually can't go on much longer like this. In Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, she talks about the difficult decision to take a job at a nonprofit that she would love because it would mean taking a pay cut. She goes on to explain that often to work at a job whose mission you love but the pay is low, you may need to have privilege. This has been my career path. I work to serve others. I work to feed my family and provide a good home and love. Do I need money to do all of that? Yes. This increase would pull our family into the green and provide a slight buffer each month. The cost of living has increased. Our pay needs to as well. MIT has a living wage calculator, and it finds for Dane County with 2 working adults and 2 kids, you should be making $28.51 an hour each. As you've heard, every SEA and EA in our district makes less than $39,000 a year. I could make more at Monona Park and Rec as a rec instructor, at Amazon, at the Black Men's Coalition. When I pay a babysitter, it's at least $10 an hour. The district prioritizes equity. This $3 an hour increase would make our pay more equitable compared with other districts, as our average starting rate is below neighboring districts. And we have 8 unfilled positions. There are many joys in this work, from finding right fit books for friends, to reading with friends, to helping teachers fill their rooms with books. But there are many stresses and hazards too. I've had to stand between aggressive students. I've intercepted books being thrown to prevent them from injuring someone. I've barely avoided being bit. I've been called very mean names. Others I know have endured much worse. My colleagues are amazing, and I literally trust my children and myself, my lives, with them. I see how hard they work every day. I find it in my tight budget to give to my hardworking colleagues who needs a knee surgery, to families who face deep loss. And I know you value us. So I know, and I now ask you to please find the $3 an hour increase in your budget to support us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Next is Ryan Ramick.
Hello, thank you. My name is Ryan Ramig, and I've been a paraprofessional or educational assistant for 8.5 years for the Monona Grove School District at Winnequa Elementary School. I also have 3 kids in the district, 2 at the high school, and a kindergartner at Winnequa. So I speak as a longtime district employee and a parent of 3. I'm here tonight to respectfully request a $3 an hour living wage increase for all EAs and SEAs across the Monona Grove School District. I've worked in childcare for as long as I can remember, starting fresh out of high school as a local daycare teacher, for years at the YMCA childcare program, and currently as an EA at Winnequa. Because I've chosen to work in childcare and elementary education most of my adult life, I've also had to subsidize my career choice by working a second, sometimes third job. There's no Friday nights with the family for me after a long work week. Other families go out and celebrate by ordering pizza or takeout, and I'm stuck taking their order while my parents watch my kids because I can't afford a babysitter. But I was never a waiter or pizza maker by choice. I proudly chose to be an educational assistant for the Monona Grove School District. EAs and SEAs do some of the hardest and most labor-intensive jobs there are to be done at school. Long, cold hours outside at recess duty during the Wisconsin winters, loud, intense lunch duties with hundreds of kids, all with all different needs, clamoring for your help, endless wiping and sanitizing of lunchroom tables until you literally have shoulder pain. We deal with some of the most fragile, neediest kids and also some of the most difficult, sometimes abusive ones, oftentimes having to run from one assignment to the next without taking any breaks. I feel unappreciated and disrespected when I go to Woodman's or Quick Trip on the weekends and I see a high school student, former student of mine, just a few years ago, making more money than I do after 8.5 years of working for the Monona Grove School District. Monona Grove School District is regarded as one of the best school districts in the county, possibly the entire state. So why are we paying our EAs and SEAs below average? And finally, if not now, when? We are only going to continue to fall further behind surrounding school districts and continue to lose talented, diverse individuals to higher paying positions elsewhere. The MGAA paras have been trying to work with the district for 7 years. 7 years to increase pay rates for the paras. During that time, we have tried to collaborate with the district by cutting our salary schedule in half to try to increase pay rates. It hasn't been enough. Paras deserve a living wage. The work we do with students is important. In addition to speaking tonight, I'm sharing with you a bunch of postcards and a petition signed by over 300 employees and district residents showing their support for a $3 an hour living wage increase for paras. I sincerely thank you, Superintendent Dr. Olson, and the entire board for your time tonight. And a huge, heartfelt, sincere thank you to everybody that has come out to support us. Teachers, staff, parents, and community members, all who came to support us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, and to all the speakers that spoke tonight. Can I please have a motion for the consent agenda?
Approval of the consent agenda is presented.
All those in favor? Michelle? Aye. Susan? Elizabeth? Aye. Eric?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Elaine? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Right. Next are recognitions.
Hey, thank you. National School Psychology Day and Occupational Therapist Day. We recently celebrated both the Occupational Therapist Day and are in the midst of celebrating School Psychology Week. We want to recognize both these groups for their amazing work they put in daily to improve the experiences of our students. Thanks to the local fire departments in both of our communities for visiting our elementary schools and teaching them about the importance of fire prevention and school safety. Students got to interact with local firefighters and even walk through a fire truck. Tiller Prairie School has been recognized as one of America's healthiest schools. The recognition awarded by Alliance for a Healthier Generation honors schools' dedication to supporting the health and well-being of students, staff, and families. TPS was recognized in 4 topics: increasing family and community engagement, strengthening social emotional health and learning, bolstering physical education and activity, and cultivating staff well-being. Within each category, the work done aligns with our strategic plan and year one objectives. And the high school DECA has put together some great things for our students and community recently. In October, they organized the Powerpuff football game where nearly 100 students participated, with the freshman team coming out victorious. This past weekend, members spent time doing yard work for our senior citizen community members. We love seeing the work our clubs and organizations do to bring our students and community together.
Dan, do you want to mention the Model UN did the presentation for the MESBA?
Sure. The the MESBA, which is essentially the Monona Chamber, has a roundtable event. They call it EDGAR, that they do quarterly, and our Model UN students presented to talk about the work that they're doing and actually as well about some of their fundraising efforts. As usual, our students represented extremely well and gave an unbelievable presentation.
Next are the correspondence and announcements.
Okay, so just a notice of election. It's that time of year, so the election notice will be posted this week. Just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Next are the administrative reports, school nutrition. Maggie Sana.
Hello, good evening. I am Maggie Santa. I'm the school nutrition director for Monona Grove School District. Thank you for having me tonight. So we are looking back. Last year was my first full school year with the district, so I put together some numbers of how things looked at the end of the school year. It is kind of hard to compare because our district is growing pretty quickly, I feel like. Even since I've been here, the almost 2 years, we've gotten quite a few new students, but I feel like a lot of our numbers look really nice after last school year. Our absentee rate, I would say, is a little bit off because we're still in COVID times technically, in that if you have COVID, you're off for 5 days. So that skews things a little bit, but yeah, I would also say the other number on here that caught my eye is meals per labor hour. We may be slightly lower compared to industry standards, but when you compare to other districts, we do a lot of things that isn't happening elsewhere. We wash our own lunch trays instead of using disposables, have a lot of production happening in the kitchens instead of a central kitchen, things like that. So the Harvest of the Month program, we had our first full school year last year. Every Thursday, we served a locally sourced item. In addition to that, we partnered with local growers as we were ordering, say, like apples in October. If they had other items that we had on the menu, we would bring those in as well. They just weren't featured. And we also offer Odyssey yogurt from Klondike Cheese Company every Thursday at the elementary schools and every day at the secondary schools. So we will be continuing this program again this year. Most of our items will be new. November is kale. We'll also have potatoes, cabbage, beets, and radishes, as long as there's no unintended issues with crops. So I included some articles when Monona Grove was featured in the news. I love this picture. It's one of our kitchen managers with a loyal little lunch customer. So yeah, those were really wonderful articles last school year. So like I said, I'm rather new to the Monona Grove School District. I started in January of 22, and we were kind of still coming out of COVID then. A lot of things were prepackaged or in other forms to avoid contamination or germ sharing during COVID. So we're kind of slowly transitioning out. If you look at our staffing levels, I feel like a lot of our staff, definitely the majority, have started since 2019. So COVID meals are primarily what they know. So it's kind of a slow transition for us to get back to scratch cooked items. I will say that the center of the plate items, which is what's circled there, oh, it's not circled. Well,
Hold on our PowerPoint. Yeah,
um,
not sure why it's not showing up. We've got it circled.
our center of the plate items are the entrees, and they are, I think, what has kids line up in the lunch line. It's also what makes kids feel comfortable or uncomfortable in the lunch line. And so that is usually the last thing to transition. We really encourage people to look at the whole menu rather than just the entrees because we are making changes to sides, adding more vegetables, adding new variety of vegetables, and presenting them in different ways, along with more traditional meal entrees. But we do encourage families to stick with us through the transition process because it's a collective impact that kind of creates the change moving forward. And students need to see each other and approach the foods together. My circle. So looking at our participation days, to me, it was really telling when I went through and looked through September and October. Kids really like pizza and chicken. Shocking.
Surprising no parent.
Right. But you can see I try to encourage my staff as well to not be discouraged when we have items like homemade veggie fried rice or the made in-house chicken and cheese quesadillas that are falling on the low participation range. Because like I said, these are newer foods that we're kind of transitioning to, and it takes time to expose kids to foods repeatedly. In addition to the actual food on the plate, we are looking to sustainability efforts as well. We recognize that school meals are one of the biggest contributors to waste in schools. So we look to how we can make our meals more sustainable. This year, we are trying to eliminate individual packets of condiments just because all of that extra plastic and packaging. There's been some wins and losses. We did learn that syrup is not worth the extra time it takes in the line. But other than that, it's been going very well.
Sounds like a sticky situation.
Oh, that was good. You're good. But looking forward, looking at long-term initiatives like switching to bulk milk instead of cartons and real silverware, which we're looking to kind of network some solutions. A lot of times when districts go to real silverware, you throw out almost as much as the plastic silverware, which is not any more sustainable. But I have heard there's a district in northern Wisconsin that has some interesting things going on with magnets and trash cans, so kind of looking into that more later. Okay, so our federal reimbursement rates have changed significantly year by year over the past 4 school years. So during COVID, the USDA increased our per meal reimbursement, and they allowed that to continue through last school year. So this school year, our reimbursement rates dropped. Honestly, I was pleasantly surprised when our reimbursement rates came out because the per meal reimbursement for students who are eligible for free or reduced price meals was pretty consistent and a little higher than last school year. It was the full pay meals that dropped significantly. And about 76% of the lunches we serve are full pay, but this is only supplementing that. We have gotten some exciting grants over the last school year. We got almost $150,000 for the Healthy Meals Initiative grant because we are one of the small school districts, according to them. We will put that money towards new capital equipment in our production kitchens, small equipment across the district, as well as some tower gardens for schools that don't have space outside for gardens. I also wrote into the grant culinary skill development with chef contracting contacting with chefs for training and recipe development. The cost of changing to a more recipe-focused software, and then actual food for taste testing and involving students in that. And then we received a $3,000 grant for Cottage Grove School to expand their garden. Their school garden right now is pretty small. So as part of our large grant, we have to apply for a recognition award through the Healthy Meals Initiative. And so they have all of these options, lunch, breakfast, or, school lunch makeover. I'm leaning towards the preparation of school meals to look at more scratch cooked items, because I think that's kind of where the funding is going to go anyways, but that is something that we have 2 school years to implement. Other funding changes we've had in our department, during COVID, USDA issued supply chain assistance funds, which were to recognize that large manufacturers were having large supply chain disruptions, that they then wanted to create an incentive for us to purchase local, minimally processed items. So we accepted 4 rounds of that so far. Technically, 2 of these 2 dates was 1 round, so it was 3 rounds. I have accepted the 4th round of funds. We haven't received them yet, but I remember that the number was actually quite a bit larger than I was expecting. So we will be receiving additional funds this school year for supply chain assistance. And then in September, we worked with Wisconsin Food Hub Cooperative because they had local foods for school funds, which allowed us to purchase local produce for free. So universal free meals is still an ongoing topic. As of right now, it's not supported at the federal level. USDA proposed to expand the CEP program, which is the community eligibility provision, by decreasing the minimum identified student percentage from 40% to 25%. That is the number of students who are eligible for free meals based on direct certification, which is participation in other programs such as food share or Medicaid. Our district would not qualify based on that level, and also it would maintain the 1.6 multiplier for free reimbursement rate, which would be incredibly low for funding the program. But states across the country are passing it, and I think kind of learning as they go somewhat, depending on the state. It's been challenging. We have a coalition in Wisconsin that is working to pass it, the Healthy School Meals for All Coalition. So I think one big thing about looking at school meals for all is that it's not just a socioeconomic consideration. Hunger impacts a lot of different levels and can occur for a lot of different reasons, especially in very small people. So we want to support the whole child when they're at school, and providing them with breakfast and lunch is part of that. At the national level, they have noticed a decrease in participation since universal free meals ended, which was during COVID. So daily lunch participation decreased by about 7%, and daily breakfast participation decreased by about 5%. But I will say that a lot of districts have taken it upon themselves to offer free breakfast for all students. So looking forward to this school year. We already had National School Lunch Week, and we did another Great Apple Crunch with Honeycrisp apples from Pleasant Springs in Orchard and Stoughton. We are hosting 3 UW dietetic interns this school year. And we are expecting a visit from USDA's administrator, Cindy Long, at the end of November. I just got an email yesterday that the date is now the 29th instead of the 28th. But she will be at Granite Ridge, and we'll have lunch with students while she's there. And part of that visit is to evaluate the grant funds and see what our plans are with that. We are also being visited by DPI for an administrative review at the end of December. So looking forward to that. Yes, government is watching us. Yeah, so any questions?
I want to say your work doesn't go unnoticed, you know.
Thank you.
Grants, you're bringing additional funding, sustainability, focusing on healthy foods is really great. And then working with local farmers. So I wanted to say I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I do have two questions. One, are students able to get seconds?
So federal guidelines don't allow that. We do encourage them to take as much as they'd like from our garden bars the first time through the line. So the entree is portioned and then fruits, vegetables are pretty unlimited.
The other one is dietary options. So if students are vegan or vegetarian, are they able to get more salad and not take the other items?
Yeah. And we also have special meals for students with like a medically necessary diet. We work with the students' families to figure out kind of what they're eating at home and what they're comfortable with, and then write a menu specifically for that student.
So, I'm sorry, just to get clarity.
Yes.
If a student is vegan or vegetarian, what should they do to?
Yeah, I would say I encourage our staff to work with them, and USDA has something called offer versus serve, where they have to take 3 components of the meal. So within our meals, they are able to build a meal even if they have specific foods that they avoid, like a vegan or vegetarian would.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for this great comprehensive report. It's very interesting to see all the things that you're doing. A couple of questions. First of all, what's our participation? The number I like to see is our participation year over year. Can you talk about last year's participation versus the prior year?
I can
Not, but I
not off
would
the
be,
top of
I'm
my
interested
head.
in that.
So part of the problem, did have that in my last presentation, but the previous school year was when, the 21-22 school year, everyone was getting free meals. Yes. So our numbers were
That's okay.
a little bit.
We understand.
Right. Our numbers were a little bit higher during that than last school year, but I would say they have been pretty consistent year to year. Again, our district is growing and we're getting new students as well. So we're serving the same number of meals, it's not necessarily an increase.
The opportunities are to increase participation.
I think we have wonderful opportunities. I'm hoping that taste testing with students and involving students in menu development in the future will be really helpful.
The other thing I know, of course, is that there's a substantial surplus in the budget from last year, but the reimbursement range changed and so on. What do you expect, what do you anticipate that's going to do to the budget this year? And whatever other sources are involved and so on.
Right.
What do you think you're going to be looking at the end of the year?
I think this year, again, we will be doing well at the end of the school year, partially because we're still getting supply chain assistance funds, and we have grant funds to help supplement our aging equipment and replacing those costs. In the future, if these additional funds don't continue, it would be a lot more nerve-wracking.
It's about how much is that? What's the total dollar value there that you're talking about?
Well, I can go back to supply chain assistance funds before, 152,000, and that's not including what we got this school year. And then the $150,000 in the grant is primarily going to equipment and improving kitchens, which would otherwise have had to come out of our budget.
I guess what I'm getting at is, do you anticipate in the long term, the way things are running, that you could continue to run probably less, but a surplus? And then what are you going to do with the excess to improve the service?
Yeah, actually, USDA requires that we don't try to operate at a surplus. Yeah, we're a nonprofit account. So long-term improving food quality, I think, is going to increase funds significantly. We also just changed our staff pay rates, which will be more expensive than in previous years as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And again, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
So good. Dan knows because I reference it all the time. I'm like, I'm always excited when you come. I think that the work that you're doing is amazing. Echo what Lorene said. I love how data-driven your presentation is, and just like even this idea of like, what is the high preference meals and what is the low preference meals? I just think is a really great way to do it. I'm so excited that we're continuing Harvest in the Month. I thought that was really cool and innovative thing that we did last year. I know that the kids probably liked it a lot. I was really glad to hear that you applied for and that we got the Healthy Meals Incentive Program. And I think you're spot on in terms of scratch cooking being the place to go. I think it's very clear that that's where the funding is going now. I mean, USDA and Chef and both are just like all in on scratch cooking. So I just think that that's really smart, really strategic. So yeah, thank you for your work. I think I have two questions for you. One is around nutrition education in general, so sort of outside the school meal component of it. Kind of what are your thoughts around, or what are we doing around just nutrition education as an idea or concept?
Yeah, so we do have another AmeriCorps service member this school year. And so she is getting into classrooms to do nutrition education. A big focus there is making it sustainable so that in the future, if we don't have an AmeriCorps service member, we're still having nutrition education built into our classroom education in a way that is not burdensome for teachers and like one more thing to put on their plates, you know? Yeah, so that is kind of a big focus of her work this school year and likely into next school year as well.
A really specific question. So I have a first grader, who, by the way, loved the Philly cheesesteak. She also came home the other day and was like, "Mom, we got fries that were made at school." And I was like, "Oh, that's great, honey." And she's like, "No, they were school-made fries." And she was so excited. But she came home with a My Plate, like, sheet recently. So would that have been from, like, the AmeriCorps person?
It could
Cassie's
have
shaking
been.
his head, so, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, perfect. I just wasn't sure like how that connected with that. Great. Second question that I have for you is, how do we increase our participation in school meals? My children have both the benefit and burden of having me as a mother, and so they are universal participators in school meals, breakfast and lunch. And when they ask me if they can take lunch from home, I say, you can't, and here is why, right? Because not only is it easier and convenient for me, I know that you're going to get balanced meals and that it's going to be diversity. I know that it makes it so it reduces stigma for kids for whom school meals are maybe their only option. And it's a benefit that we give to the school, right? But like they have to get that lecture from me because, like I said, they have both the benefit and burden of me being their mother. So, kind of, what can we do to increase the school meal participation?
It's a good question. It's a big question, I think. We appreciate you advocating with your students. Maybe
I
they'll
got
tell
you
their
too,
friends as
Maggie.
well. I think that for me, a big focus is high school because of open campus. And if you look at the just like 3-block radius around the high school, there are so many different options that they can get to and back really quickly. So I have thought about like menu committees, working with the culinary program at the high school to try to get them involved. I think having student buy-in is really important because then they take ownership of the program and encourage their friends to eat it too. The elementary school I think is harder than the high school because we do have a pretty good participation rate at the elementary school. And so how to grab those kids that aren't eating right now is more challenging. I have thought about, working with parent organizations as well, because I think sometimes the narrative is behind. And so parents might not even know what's happening in our school programs.
I think that that's great. Well, any way that we can be helpful and supportive, let us know. And again, thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I just really appreciate it. I think it's fantastic. I love our school meal program. I can't speak more highly of it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. That was really a nice presentation. And I think you've done a great job with the funding and the grants. We formed a group probably 15 years ago, 10 years ago, called Healthy Classrooms at the University of Wisconsin Medical School that actually came out into the different districts and raised money and then helped fund exactly some of the things you're doing. So I think that's really great that you're doing that. And it was interesting to have that mix with the medical schools at the time. Do you have any concerns about the time that's allowed in the schools for instance, lunch meals?
Yes, and it's a real challenge.
That's the feedback we get.
Yes,
There isn't enough time for the child to eat.
I know, understand it's a challenge when writing like the school schedule. We encourage at least 20 minutes of seated time, which means that all of the kids have gotten through the line before the 20 minutes is being considered. I know that the Madison School District has implemented required 20 minutes of seated time, and some schools have made it seem like a breeze, and other schools have had some challenges with it. So it can be really challenging to balance the school schedule, but I would advocate for more seated time.
And the only other question I have, some of the feedback we get, similar to the question that Lorraine asked, was quantities available. Frequently, one parent will say, well, my student at the middle school gets exactly the same amount of food that my student who's twice as large at the high school is receiving.
I think we do a lot of, like I said, the offer versus serve, which is where we have a meal template kind of written out, but students are allowed to build their own tray. And we see students overlooking a lot of parts of the meal at times. There are trays that I go by that I think, my goodness, I hope you don't take a picture of that and send it to your parents because you built it yourself, but it looks very sad. But yes, it's a lot of times it's up to the students to build the meal that is right for them and take as much as they'd like of the fruits and veggies and the portion that's right for them.
That helps us answer the questions.
Hi. Firstly, I just want to say thank you so much. The work that you and your associates do just fuels our high school every single day. And believe me, I'm glad I don't have to deal with hangry high school teenagers on top of everything else. So thank you for that. If I may get a bit personal here, a little known fact about me is that the federal government might be after me. You see, when I was about 8 years old, I refused to eat my spinach. And my mother, naturally, was so offended that she wrote a letter to Michelle Obama. And believe it or not, we got a certified handwritten response from the First Lady saying that I should eat my spinach. So raised in that type of household and in a community that has those same values, I really appreciate all the work that you do towards ensuring that, young kids like me and even younger get nutrition. And so my questions in that regard are, firstly, do we have any programs or, in essence, I'd say audits in place to ensure that we are limiting sugar and other unhealthy additives, and at the same time, incentivizing and educating on healthy meal planning for all of our students? And the second thing that I think has been brought up here, but I would like to directly ask you about, is if we have any sort of statistics or estimates on the scope of how many students rely on school meals, especially during like COVID, but now also in the present day, just to see like how much value to our community we can get from the expansion of these programs. So just to wrap it up, I really want to say thank you so much for providing our district with the fuel it needs to run every single day.
Yeah, thank you. First, I will say that I've been in the cafeteria many days at the high school, and they are very lovely there. They're not hangry. Yes, so this number of students in our district who are eligible or currently approved for free or reduced price meals, last I checked, was 20.5%. That number may or may not be very insightful depending on how families feel about applying for the program. It can definitely under capture the need in the district. Um, we do have an audit with DPI in December, and they will be looking at our nutrition of our meals. But there are several great lists out there, like CSPI or Minneapolis Public Schools has a good list about ingredients in school meals. And so that is something that we're kind of implementing slowly over time. To give you an idea, our menu cycle has to start almost a full school year ahead of time because of how we get USDA funding. We have to commit to products in January or February for the following school year. So it is a very slow process, but it is coming along in baby steps.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for your question.
I just have a comment for the board. So there was a bill that was presented by the legislative, Bill 805, Assembly Bill 805, which proposes to have free breakfast and lunch for students, but it was just presented right now. So as a legislative representative, we don't know what's going to happen with that. But there is a bill now that's written, so we'll see what happens. Do you know anything about?
Monday was the big presentation, wasn't
yeah.
it? Yeah, I haven't heard anything since then. It's been in the works since the press conference that we hosted in March was addressing that. So they have been working on it for quite a while.
In the White House last year, for those of you who don't follow the school nutrition world news cycle, but the White House last year held a big summit on hunger. And it just hit its 1-year anniversary too. And so a lot of these granting programs that Maggie's been referencing and some of like the way the world is going, or like an outcropping of some of those pieces. So really trying to move USDA in particular in a place where more people have quicker access and more efficient access to all of USDA's meal programs, which is inclusive of their school meal program. But yeah, if you want to check out the White House conference on hunger and physical activity, it has some other and.
It does. But I've heard that was largely focused on school meals.
It is. It was-
which was wonderful.
Yeah. It was all, no, I don't want to say exclusively because WIC was an important component to that too, but it was very large proportion focused on school meals and universal school meals. So.
Thanks. And just one more point I wanted to ask. I was very fortunate to have a very powerful influence in elementary school at Cottage Grove on focusing on physical education as well as eating healthy. And so with that, there's, I think, a massive impetus to present this information to the student body, especially younger kids. So do we have any plans or mechanisms to take the changes and proposals that we've made tonight and slowly and surely explain that to our younger students in a way that will help them build those habits that can become so influential over time?
Yeah, I think that one of our focuses on that is school gardens because kids really appreciate what they're eating more when they have a hand in growing it. And also one thing that our farm to school service member has talked about that is really exciting to me is having older students involved with younger students to try to have not necessarily peer to peer, but just that influence of other students rather than the adults that they hear from all the time. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I actually have nothing to see. We have a pretty long agenda, so there was nothing that couldn't wait, so no report tonight.
But thanks for making space for Maggie.
All right, next are board reports. So student board representative report, Krishna?
All right, it's my time to shine. All right, good evening, everyone. So this is our second student report, the first one being last month. Before I begin, I just want to point out that this is merely a snapshot of varying non-athletic activities and events ongoing at Monona Grove High School. On a daily basis, students at Monona Grove are often involved in so much more beyond the scope of what we could possibly report. And so the events mentioned are chosen based on teacher recommendation, the effect on the high school body, and for the representation of school spirit. So suffice it to say that infinitely impressive feats are made at Monona Grove High School each and every day. To begin, we're going to start with Model UN. Model UN made the trip down to Chicago for a conference called Simon. The team did very well at one of the country's most competitive one-day conferences in the nation. The team won 8 awards, 2 in first place, the coveted Gavel Award, 1 in second, and 5 in third. So congratulations to Mr. Wallace and Mr. Jeffson and their team. Meanwhile, as referenced earlier by Dan Olson, the members of DECA, the business club of the high school, raked leaves for senior citizens this past weekend. Members met on Saturday morning and assisted those in need with their fall yard cleanup. Members worked hard, enjoyed the beautiful weather, and celebrated their volunteer work with pizza at Garver Feed Mill afterwards. Meanwhile, the students of David Riffle's advanced marketing class are currently engaging in multiple projects assisting the Travel Cottage Grove initiatives. Students prepare marketing materials to highlight the businesses of Cottage Grove and why tourists should explore the village. Student teams recently published their analysis of what makes each attraction special. Members of the Cottage Grove Chamber of Commerce served as judges for the presentations and highly praised the work of our students. In addition, on October 25th, the Monona Grove High School Choir performed their fall concert, Tunes to Give You Goosebumps. Songs included Jabberwocky by Carolyn Jennings, Hist Whist by John Richard, The Autumn Leaves by Deke Sharon, and so much more. It was a really wonderful event to kick off MG's numerous musical performances throughout the year, which will soon include show choir, jazz band, orchestra, solo ensemble, and other tremendous productions to come. And to wrap it up, today advisory students, including myself, learned about redlining and voter registration in a lesson themed after justice. Throughout my career at Monona Grove, the administration has utilized advisory as an opportunity to get students to discuss themes such as diversity, equality, and school safety. It's yet another example of how, from the halls of the school board, offices of administration, and to the desks of students, Monona Grove is a tight-knit community. So thank you, and I look forward to continuing to connect students with the board in next month's presentation.
Thank you, Krishna. All right. Next is Personnel Committee. Eric?
Personnel Committee met on October 16th and again on October 25th. We presented a proposal to MGEA for educational assistants, paraprofessionals. We are still in the negotiation process, and we are meeting again on November 15th.
Thank you. Next is Teaching, Learning, and Equity Committee. Elizabeth?
Yeah, so the Teaching, Learning, Equity Committee met on October 24th. We had 2 items on the agenda. One was talking about the supports and services that we provide to our range of our learners. Krista Foster was there with some members of her team to talk about students that have academic needs. Lisa Hype was there with her elementary level advanced learning team, talking about kind of what we do for students identified as having advanced learning needs. And so we were able to have that discussion. The second item on the agenda was around what to do next now that we're moving into a community school model in Cottage Grove, and specifically around a recommendation around starting an ad hoc committee to help support that transition. So more to come there as the administration gathers some ideas and recommendations and brings it to the committee, and then I will bring it to you all.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And last, Policy Committee, Susan?
Yes, the policy committee met on 11/2, and this was our second meeting with reviewing the Neola materials. We've reviewed close to 20 policies, and we'll continue tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, if anybody wants to join us, with review of the Neola policies. Hope we will finish, but if we have a few left, we'll probably be able to finish that very soon. And then tonight, we are going to be discussing one of the suggested revisions, and Dan will probably lead that discussion about open enrollment. So see you tomorrow morning at 8. Yeah.
Can't even wait. Don't be late.
Possible action items. First, the professional services agreement between McKinstry and Ascension LLC and Monona Grove School District.
Okay, so you recall that we had our board workshop on October 18th, and so as a continuation of that discussion and presentation that night, we do have a proposal. We've got a number of representatives from McKinstry that are here this evening that will go through the proposal and answer any of your questions. Also, at the same time, not for action tonight, but we want to give you a little bit of a preview as well on our updated sustainability plan, and we look to bring that back to next month for discussion and a proposal for you to consider. So with that, our McKinstry's team, if you'd like to introduce yourselves and whomever would like to, present. And Mark, I don't know if you want to kick off a little bit about the proposal or?
No. As Dan said, I think it's just fleshing out more of what we discussed in the workshop and to kind of just, have it more user-friendly. So I guess Nick is going to lead the discussion and we'll entertain any questions once he gets through the presentation. But it's kind of a combination of what we discussed at the workshop and then possible projects going forward, as Dan said, that we would bring back if the board decides to do that.
So I thought we're perhaps to go through the sustainability presentation first, just to kind of preview what we're going to, be talking about next month, and then we'll get into the actual action item tonight.
Right. Yeah, no, thanks. We very much appreciated the workshop. It was good participation. I know Eric and Peter were traveling and couldn't be there, but we had good questions. Elizabeth and Rochelle pushed through on some procurement items, and we talked, through the vision, talked about the history of the projects that we've done. Lorraine was able to join us for a good portion of it as well, so it was good to get that input. But what we really wanted to do was kind of set the stage and, Peter's work, over the years through the Sustainability Committee and now through administration to look at that vision. And there's federal funding available right now that's isn't going to be around forever. So we wanted to kind of give a path to what does it look like if we would build out the entire sustainable plan from an economic standpoint and also from a technical plan. And then once I get through that, Scott's going to highlight some of the capital planning, because I think separating the capital planning from the sustainability planning, they'll come together through the overall report and the dashboard. But I think highlighting that area, we'll talk about at the end for the possible actions. So if we could I just want to go through, and some of this is going to be redundant, so I'm going to be brief. So we looked at, as I said, there's funding available. We did take a look. There's approximately 1.7 available overall for all of the sites. If you look at the Inflation Reduction Act that we talked about, that it's a payment in lieu of a tax credit that you would get the fiscal year following implementation once the system is operational. So we'll just review the sites, but just starting with the overall sustainability vision and kind of where we're at. So just kind of highlighting the high school project that was implemented is up and running. And now we looked at the other sites, all but Taylor Prairie. Taylor Prairie does not really offer an opportunity, just given the nature of the roof and the site, for much of a solar play, but the others do, and we'll kind of highlight what that looks like. So we looked at Granite Ridge, due to some ongoing warranty issues with the roof. Dan and Mark kind of pointed us to maybe looking at a ground solution based on some district property that's available. That allowed us to upsize the system to get almost a 90% offset on that site. And you have a pretty good interconnection run there that does that. So overall, the IRA direct pay for that, is over $500,000 for that project. We looked at Winnequa roof solution there. Again, over 90% offset there. Good potential, direct pay at around that 30% level based on the overall application. Glacial, we looked at a roof mount solution there. Not quite as good of an offset. Some roofing issues there. The IRA does also allow, as we discussed in the workshop, for some roofing funding. So that's, as you lay out your capital plan over the next couple of years, that's something to keep in mind, that there are funds available there for about a 30% offset on roofing work that you would be able to get a direct payment on, but from that standpoint. And then we looked at the district office and the charter school, just, again, a smaller system there, but just wanted to kind of wrap up, all of the buildings, and again, a direct pay play there as well. And then Cottage Grove, good roof solution there. Gary, the new facility person, who's been great to work with, had some really good input around how we would interact with the roof, and we shared with him, he's got good background with roofing and that type of thing. So I think he's going to be a good asset for the district, and you'll see in that design, we kind of stayed away from equipment on the roof, and that's the solution there, about $200,000 in direct pay. So when you sum it up, and we worked through Mark and Dan a little bit to say, hey, what's the next logical step? And as we said in the workshop, there's a couple schools with some lighting opportunity that back and return close to $1 million on the $600,000 investment. And we laid out what the 30-year energy benefit is for each of those sites, and you can see that they do have a nice rate of return when you look at that, especially given the potential IRA deduction. So again, I was a little low on my total there. I think it's actually almost 1.9 with the total IRA there. There is also a chance, and you guys were successful last time with the EIGB grant, there is some potential for that as well. We did not include that in. But certainly, the committee and district really shined on that play and really had a winning proposal there. So that would be another option as well that we could pursue going forward when it comes to funding. But Mark and Dan kind of said, hey, maybe Granite Ridge, given the nature of that with the offset, that might be a next logical step. So that's kind of what we're looking at, potentially doing some final pricing onto and making sure that we're getting the best financial return for that. So that's what we'll be coming back in December with a potential bundle of those two projects going forward. So that's really the summary of the sustainability workshop. Maybe I'll stop there before we get into the capital planning and just ask if there's any questions, or Elizabeth.
Yeah, just a quick question. I know that you said at the beginning of the presentation that Taylor Prairie is not a good fit for solar because of the roof, but would we consider ground mounts there potentially?
Hi.
Oh, hello, Sean.
He was having surgery the night of the workshop.
Oh my gosh, are you okay?
3 weeks into it, so.
Oh man, shoulder?
Rotator cuff.
Rotator, yeah.
He'll do anything to get out of a
Tough
board
one
meeting.
too. It's a long recovery.
Yeah, so I'm the one that kind of put this together.
Yeah.
Develop it, and I've been part of the committee before, and kind of this is an update of what we started in 2019. But yeah, if there's land available, certainly. I mean, but that's up to how much land you have around Taylor Prairie.
How
But
much land do you need?
There's not a lot.
I just curious. I don't even know like what what you're talking
I
about.
mean, you need 12 to 15 feet spacing between each row.
Okay.
And you expand that, it takes up quite a bit of space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
But yeah, you could put a small system on the shingled roof, but it'd be pretty small that the economics wouldn't.
Yeah, wouldn't work out. Okay. Great, thank you. I had one other question about just ground mounts in general. And that was a question that I asked Dan after the workshop, which is, for Granite Ridge, ground mounts sound great. I guess what protections would go around it to ensure that like students weren't engaging with them, right?
Yeah.
Climbing on them, throwing rogue footballs, that kind of stuff.
So there's an
Good
electrical
question.
code, NEC code, that you need to have a 7-foot fence
Great.
around the perimeter.
Great.
And then you allow enough space for them to maintain it,
Okay.
for maintenance vehicles to get around, but yes, we would include a 7-foot fence with a gate and access in it, for that reason, with a gate and lock gate.
Yeah, thank you.
Lorena, I just had And then when you look at having to use the ground, we're going to have good feedback from administration about whether or not that's available. I think we're probably talking about extra land, right? Versus what we're currently using for fields.
Yeah,
Space?
so we've had some preliminary conversations,
Good,
and
okay.
obviously we involve our principals and about what their use is for students. So when we come back with a proposal, we'll be able to talk through that and what the use would be for it. Yeah.
Oh, here's sorry.
Hi, firstly, it's so nice to see you all again. Thank you so much for coming and presenting this to the board. When Peter and I had the opportunity to work with you, wow, hard to believe, a year ago to almost 2 years ago now, for the solar array at the high school, it was truly a fantastic moment because now we are living in an era where renewable energies and sustainability in general are not only good for our environment and community, but also for our finances. So you are truly making a generation's promises into a reality. And so with that, I had some questions I wanted to ask you, specifically to begin with about these slideshow resources. Since I really want to involve students and student voice on this project. I was wondering if I could use these resources to present to the student body or to whom it may concern about these changes that are being proposed for our district.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a question for administration, so.
Yeah, I'd be glad to follow up with you about which parts are still kind of draft and which are ready to be shared publicly, so.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you so much. And secondly, and I recognize this might be a question again more for administration, but I wanted to ask, firstly, do you intend to allow this to be sort of a localized project where each individual administration leads their own project? And secondly, how would you or administration recommend that we involve students in these projects?
Good question. I think there's opportunities for during development, during design and engineering to include students, for people that have that propensity. So we certainly could look to do that. And then, going through the implementation phase, if people were interested in, the construction of it and that type of thing, we certainly would welcome that, based on, administration's input on that as well. So certainly.
Thank you so much. I really support this, and I'm so grateful that you're doing all of the work that you do to make this a reality. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate it.
What I have, thanks, by the way, for this is great. Looking forward to it. What I'd like to hear though is how we're doing with the high school project, how that's looking, how the finances of that are falling out at this point. So at some point, can we get, if you don't have that information tonight, can we get?
Yeah, we could.
Some reporting on how successful, because, I mean, that's a pilot where you're proposing a bunch of other things. So let's look at how we're doing and see what it's doing to the bottom line so that it will help us make a judgment about.
Yeah, we are monitoring that, as part of our agreement. We certainly, go through and make sure as this drill, we rated the savings based on, available sunlight days like today where it looks like the world's gonna end, you have to predict these type of days too, so I think, but yeah, we certainly can come back and that would be we can give an update on how that's going.
Really appreciate when you see the current sort of snapshot of where we are financially with that, how that's.
Yeah. Well, and you guys, you're the leaders. We implemented several other systems, one down in Clinton and others over the summer. So certainly they look to you guys as leaders and even now with these grants coming out. But yeah, we certainly can report that out and provide that information. So as you know, we guarantee the cost basis and also the savings. So none of us want to fail on that front. So yeah, we'll certainly come back to that. So thank you.
Well, I just add to yours,
Hi.
Peter, okay.
Can I just follow in
Yes,
with one more
yes.
question? The IRA financing, how long is that going to be available for?
Well, I think it was through
Through 2030 right now, they're talking.
Okay, so we have good time to get through sort of this list.
Yeah.
We don't have to like do it all.
Yeah, and I think that was Dan's and Mark's vision to kind of phase it. Obviously, there's financial, considerations. I mean, the payback's good, but it's also something to be considered. I mean, nobody can crystal ball the crazy world of the election, so we say that with a caveat, right? So current status. Yeah. Way to say that. I didn't think of that quick, but it was good.
Yes, and I would just encourage, again, this district and Peter and McKinstry to continue when they're able to present at the WSB January meeting to the other school districts to show what you're doing. I mean, this is still of great interest to a lot of other school districts. And when I talk about the solar panels and having a student involved in that as well, people just are shocked. They said, "Did you really do that?" And I said, "Well, yeah."
Yeah, we do have some materials.
Right, leadership and committees.
Yeah, as a brief compliment off of Susan Manning's points, as it so happens, this weekend I'll be heading to an event called the Dane County High School Climate Conference. It's an event I've been working to plan. This is the third one that I've planned and worked with, and we have hundreds of students sign up each and every year. And this is exactly one of the changes that we really want to see in so many of our districts, not just in Monona Grove, but also in districts just across the entire state. And so I know that there's a lot of support for measures like this to begin to be implemented. And it's so exciting to see now with the IRA's impacts that we do truly have the abilities to make that into a reality. So I'd say that I can just speak from a personal standpoint when I say that there is a lot of student support at our high school as well as from other high schools across the county for what you are working to make a reality. So thank you so much for that.
Can I pivot? Eric, do you have anything or? No?
Nope.
Lori, oh, sorry.
Are we
You
ready?
have something? I thought you raised
Are you comfortable with a motion at this time, or are you still?
We have one
wanna-
more, I think,
What?
thing that they wanted to discuss, right?
Yeah, this is an action. This is just letting you know, we're gonna come back in December with, we're gonna,
Well, we have a recommended action for,
But it's not on this,
yeah, it's on the capital planning.
on the capital proposal that's coming next.
Maybe if I could pivot to that, and I'll let Scott speak to some of the semantics of it, but at the workshop, we reviewed, looking at the district's assets and just overall, we were talking about, seems like the high school isn't that old, but next, it's 23 years old. So looking at the list of assets you have and the millions of dollars that's worth, to look at a capital plan going forward so you can fiscally plan for some of those upgrades over time so you don't have a big tsunami of funding. We're working with some districts that are, hundreds of millions of dollars behind in their capital, so they're starting to have secondary issues. So the reveal dashboard that we're implementing right now in the current phase, which will give you the utility tracking, this capital planning module will then give you a dashboard to capital plan for infrastructure renewals and upgrades over time in a planned fashion, and you'll have data to make that. So if you're gonna make considerations for how to fund that, you're gonna have information and data to support those recommendations. So, Scott, I don't know if I missed anything there, but
No, I think you hit the key point, which is a data-driven planning effort. So the first part of the proposal is to come in and collect the data so that we can put it on the dashboard. And when we collect the data, that's looking at every asset throughout every school. So that's visual inspection, that's speaking with the maintenance staff, looking at work order history, and just understanding troubled assets. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is put a an observed remaining life on every asset. And then we start building up your buildings in the dashboard with all these pieces of data so that we can also prioritize which assets are more important than others. And we understand how to prioritize by working with the school district. So if, for example, if you're in a classroom and there's an HVAC unit that handles that classroom, and if that HVAC unit fails, that impacts the learning environment pretty greatly, which is the core mission of a school district. So that would get a higher priority score than something that's not as impactful to the students. So we use this data to start prioritizing assets so we can build that capital plan based on when things are expected to need to be replaced. And then when we do that, we look for funding opportunities to find money to replace those assets that are most in need. And then in doing so, this takes a proactive approach to your planning and to your asset replacement, which will reduce your emergency maintenance fees over time, the emergency breakdowns, all of that stuff by getting rid of the oldest, most needed assets in your facilities. So it's a lot of words there, but we did have that, the board workshop, and there is a whole platform that goes with that. But ultimately, that's what we're driving towards.
I think the other thing it'll do is it'll highlight, if you look at your maintenance team, you're, probably a little light relative to head count. So we'll be able to talk about maintaining those assets in an efficient manner, because you do have some employees that do a remarkable job in those buildings. So I think, that's the other thing. So it's a good tool to be able to communicate the fact that you're being good stewards on energy, good stewards, financially and operationally, and then maintaining those assets so you're not, coming up with a big emergency repair. So.
And the key with any system that's data-driven is the data that's in it. So there's a large effort to collect the data and make sure that that's accurate to go into it. And it's also a 3-year term where we keep the data updated so that the information at your fingertips is usable. So from year to year, you'll know what projects you have to attack in order to keep your facilities in the condition that you want to keep them in. And if there's money that's left over, if you don't have any immediate need, that gives you an idea of how much money you can contribute to Fund 46. And you can save that for 3 years down the road when you have a bunch of assets that are going to be in need. So it's really a proactive long-term planning approach using the data.
All right, well, I've got some questions. I'm sorry I missed the workshop. I was working out of town. I believe that managing your facilities carefully, there is substantial savings to be made. I also think, and I hadn't been thinking about it in these terms, but improving the learning environment is also an important thing to make. However, this is a fairly significant expenditure. For 3 years for that data analysis, for a facilities planning process. And when I look over the proposal, I think I'm kind of looking for more specifics about what areas in which we anticipate to make savings, so that I can make a judgment of the value of this, of our expenditure here versus what we can expect out of this program. When I look at the proposal, I'm just kind of missing specifics in that way. And I need to make a better value judgment about this. And so that's not specifically a question, but it is, so.
No, I've got, there's a few examples here. So the first is when you have all the data at your fingertips and you can proactively plan, you might look and see, I'm just going to use HVAC as an example, and rooftop units or air conditioning units, we'll call them. So let's say you have all this data and you know that next year you have to replace 10 air conditioning units. The year after that, you have to replace 5. The year after that, you have to replace 5. So now that you have this data at your fingertips, maybe you don't replace those 10 in year 1, 5 in year 2, and 5 in year 3. You group them all together in year 2 and shift things around so that you can increase your purchasing power to drive the cost down on what you're buying. So that's one example. So there's a cost avoidance from how much the actual equipment costs when you can group like for like or similar pieces of equipment together and more strategically purchase
year in and year out. The other piece is by knowing which assets are highest priority and in need of replacement, you can avoid a situation of throwing good money after bad. So we have a customer where in the middle of the heating season, they had a system fail. They couldn't occupy the building and they had to provide emergency repairs. And this happened, right after we completed this service for them and collected the data. It was the number one asset on the list that should have been replaced, and it should have been replaced several years ago, but it failed in a time of need. So they had a costly emergency repair that was about $100,000 on an asset that should have been replaced a long time ago. So it's a situation where they had to throw good money after bad, and we're trying to avoid those situations. And then on top of that, by getting rid of those old assets, your emergency repair fees should drop down. And then on top of that, just being able to proactively plan for a rainy day. So if in looking out 10 years, if in years 1, 2, and 3, you don't have any significant assets that need replacement, you can start putting money away and saving it in Fund 46. So in year 5 and 6, you have that money at your fingertips to address the need in the future. Or you could also time that when you have debt falling off to look at different ways to fund upgrades for your facilities.
At the end of 3 years, it's a 3-year agreement. We're talking about this data system. Do we still have access to that after 3 years?
The data in the system would be yours. So at any point, it can all be downloaded into Excel. So that's no problem. But if after 3 years you wanted to continue, we would continue with a similar fee-based annual agreement, like what's in year 2 and year 3.
Do we have any comments about our ability to do any of this work, or in our bandwidth, or our capabilities, our expertise to do this work in-house?
No.
No, we don't, or we don't?
No, we don't have the expertise.
Uh-huh.
And it's time consuming. Gary and I met preliminary with them to go over the scope and how we were prioritized, carpeting versus, how detailed do we get? And as you know, getting into the HVAC, electrical, plumbing, or whatever needs expertise, and we just don't have that.
What's the total value of our facilities infrastructure? Any estimate?
I have an idea.
What?
Yeah. The replacement cost, I'm sure it's over 100 million.
Oh, I was gonna say 100 million at least.
Yeah.
And to build new facilities is probably 200.
I would say,
already,
replacement.
200 to 300
Yeah, because what's a high school these days per square foot? 300?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And in terms of, your organization that's managing that facility, how many people do we have? Now,
Counting our lead, it would be.
not counting at the sort of the custodial level, but
No,
counting
counting, we have our director who's knowledgeable, and then we have 1, 2, 3, and we're looking for a replacement for 4.
Okay, you have an open position. You
Yeah,
have 4
yeah,
positions.
Of the maintenance direct, but they're, like I said, they're not certified in plumbing or HVAC or whatever. And a couple of them been here long enough that they kind of hold things together and know the ins and outs. Yeah.
One of the things that happens in a school district, especially if you're missing a position right now, is that there's a lot of focus on the day-to-day activities, and there's not a lot of time to think further ahead in the strategic positions. So this helps essentially make your maintenance staff more capable and gives them more tools to use and have information at their fingertips to help strategically plan for the future.
Philosophically, I'm generally of the opinion that we should outsource things that aren't of educational expert, that we should be educational experts and other things that require other capabilities and, knowledges, understandings. We should outsource those. And of course, the exception is what we've done with food service, which we did outsource, and then we pulled it back in, and we're doing a much better job. So it's the counterexample we had tonight to sort of that philosophy. But I do believe that we,
This is even gonna help that, right?
well, hopefully.
That commercial kitchen equipment is part of the assets, right? And so then when we think about how we set up for scratch cooking, for example,
But I generally think we shouldn't distract our things with things aren't any more than necessary with things that aren't sort of focused on. Right. Thank you, guys.
All right, I have another motion, please. So basically, we're waiting for the motion. Yes. You're okay with that?
Yes, again, Roberts does let you do it before the discussion too, as well. Okay, super. I would like to recommend approval of the long-term planning partnership proposal with McKinstry.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Rochelle?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Aye.
Maureen? Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried. And did you have another presentation?
No, we took up the time, sorry.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That clock hasn't been updated for daylight savings time.
Yeah.
Feels that way though.
Aren't they all connected? Don't you have some system to update those?
I think it's battery operated.
Is that one of the assets that McKinstry is gonna be taking a look at? Because our clocks are broken, McKinstry, while you're there.
We have a dollar threshold.
Bye. Right, next is the resolution authorizing a taxable tax and revenue anticipation promissory note for cash flow purposes not to exceed $5 million.
Yeah, I provided information, the reasoning behind this, in other districts I've had, that this is kind of a backup for cash flow needs, if you find yourself during the year, short. And as I said, we're limited to what we could borrow this year. And so, I'm proposing this to backfill, going forward as needed. And, we can, repay as we get funds in, and so we limit our expense on that end as well. As I indicated, bond counsel has reviewed this, and it's an agreement that would be renewed every year. And then I will be working with PMA to maybe alter our strategy about the way we do short-term borrows, because as I said, we are limited based on the group bid that we do to get a bank qualified loan. And so we may need to alter that process going forward, but this is basically a backup for our needs.
Can I have a motion, please?
I move approval of resolution authorizing a taxable tax and revenue anticipation promissory note for cash flow purposes not to exceed $5,000.
$5 million.
$5 million.
Oh, it says 5,000 in the actual.
There's a typo, so.
5
we need to
million,
get that one
that's
right.
different.
Yes.
That is a significantly different amount. Tish, let it reflect that I said 5 million, not 5,000.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, we'll move to vote. Rochelle?
Aye.
Right here.
Elizabeth? Peter?
Oh, we just got updated.
Oh.
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried.
Oh, it's fine. That's what it says on my board docs.
All right.
No, I can
Yeah,
see the
it
same
did say
thing.
that, Yeah. But if you refresh, it now says 5 million.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just, that's.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
All right, next item is the new high school course proposals for the 2024-2025 school year.
Okay. So when our policy regarding curriculum does require board approval when we add significant, programs such as new courses. This is the time of year that when we have proposals we bring to the board, that way, the high school administration can start their process of scheduling for next year with our students and get any new courses into the, course offerings booklet. So there's 3 proposals. There's a memo describing the rationale for each of those. Principal McGrath is here this evening. Be glad to answer any questions that you have about any of the courses.
I was just going to say, it's actually a pretty light change for this year, so I don't have any questions, other than the AP Capstone Diploma Project. I think once we get that started, I'd really like to hear what students are doing for that.
Me too, of course.
Right? I'd really like to hear in the next year or two, especially when we start out, what students are doing. So, and thank you for proposing that. Mm-hmm.
Great, can I have a motion, please?
I move approval of the new high school course proposals for the 2024-2025 school year as presented.
Further discussion? Okay, move to vote. Rochelle? Susan? Elizabeth? Peter? Eric?
Aye.
Lorene? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, next, discussion items. PO 5113, open enrollment.
Okay, so Susan, brought this up in her report with the policy committee. So the open enrollment policy, that's obviously a really important policy that the board has some discretion on. The open enrollment laws give the board opportunities to make decisions with regard to how many seats that you open, per grade level based on space. And the board really has three options. You can simply say, we open up this number of seats, and then if there are more application than seats available, you have a random selection lottery system for those seats. You also have the discretion to have a policy to give preference to certain individuals, such as individuals who might currently be attending, move out of the district, an opportunity for them to stay in the district is typical for preference, or siblings of students currently attending. And the third option is to guarantee acceptance for certain individuals, such as siblings or students who are currently attending, regardless of whether there's space or not. And so for many years, our policy had been preference for those two groups that I mentioned. When we opened Granite Ridge, we no longer had concern at most of our buildings about space. And so we did change the policy to guarantee acceptance for those individual groups. And so we've had that policy in place since 2020. And as we've had that, we've kind of been monitoring about, well, how many students are we having that are coming in? Are we now having students accepted in grade levels or in programs that we're struggling to staff because of it, or creating larger class sizes? Last year, for example, we had a total of 17 students that were accepted because of the guarantee. That's out of about 135 total. So it's a small percentage.
17 siblings.
Either siblings or students who are currently attending that moved out of the district. So one or the other. Yeah. And one of the challenges, as you're well aware, right, is we have some challenges with staffing right now in special education. And so we did, have had students with significant needs that we've struggled to have staff available in order to meet those needs. And so we've talked about, and actually our administrative recommendation is to change the policy back to preference versus guarantee. Our policy committee, and I don't want to speak for them, obviously is a very long discussion, about that. And this is really, I think, a challenging decision, right? Because the idea is you want to keep, for siblings, right, keep families together. That's kind of the right thing to do. But we also have to have the capacity to serve our students, and we certainly, want to look at our resident students. Once they're here, they're all our students. I mean, we really look at it that way. But that's kind of the discussion. And Krista Foster can, speak to. We don't want to talk obviously about individual, students, but in general, how that has impacted our ability to serve those students. Obviously, our policy committee members are well versed on this, and we've talked a lot about it. So that's kind of the background, behind this. And so there's not action tonight; it's for discussion only. If the board is interested in a policy change, we'd bring it back at the next meeting for a second reading and possible approval.
Okay, I'll begin. I am against changing that policy, and pretty much because of equity. I can't imagine any family having to split up a family, having one child going to one district and one having to go to another. I think we need to come up with another solution and focus on supporting our special ed department, but not breaking up families. I am strongly against that. Susan?
I agree. I basically am opposed to this. I voted for this in the committee so that we could bring this forward and have a full board discussion. If we had voted against it as a committee, it wouldn't have come to the board for discussion. So that was my reasoning for supporting it from the committee, because I want to hear exactly what you just expressed and from Eric and Peter and the rest of the board members about this issue.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'm curious your perspective, Peter and Eric. Like Dan said, we had a really lengthy conversation about this in policy committee. My concern around it, apart from, I think what you referenced, Lorraine, in terms of breaking up families, which seems problematic just on its face. The other challenge that I have with it is that if you look at our historical open enrollment, open seats, students with disabilities hardly ever have any seats. And so if we do this, then the probability that we will accept a student with a disability under open enrollment falls very, very low, if not non-existent. And I have concerns about that from an equity perspective as well.
I don't have concerns about it because it's open enrollment. And I think we have a responsibility in our district to serve the students in our district first and as a priority. My concern with, when I originally read this, I had your concerns, but then I'm thinking we would be taking resources away from the students we already have in the district. So those students that we have in our district, specifically our students with disabilities in our districts, those students need to be our priority, and we need to focus on those students first and foremost before we even look at open enrollment. So I actually would agree with this based on that. It sounds, frustrating if you have a sibling, but I think, I think you have to consider that these are students that are open enrolling in our district, not students that are already there. So my concern would be to take away resources that we need to keep for the students in the district, so. Peter?
Yeah, there is an issue. There's more than one way to look at the equity issue. One of them is that underfunding of special needs students costs the other students, every other student in this district, $2,000 of money that we could spend on their education already today. This is the estimate that was presented last year at the WASB meeting for our school district. Because special needs students are underfunded. And some districts end up taking on the burden much more strongly than other districts, and ours is one of those. And so we have to look at the fact that, and it's heartbreaking to think about what we have to do relative to funding students and what we would have to make these decisions. And with the policy change, we are also free to accept anybody we want to, disabilities or not. And I would encourage us, because we do have the resources to accept any students that we believe that we can handle fairly without an undue burden on our other students. But there's a problem with funding special needs students, and we have to think about, as Eric says, all of our students in the district. And what particularly worries me is school districts say, yeah, we can't support your student. Why don't you send them to open enroll them over to Monona Grove because they can support them. We don't have the resources to support this student. You want to know what? This kind of happens with out-state people, students out-state. It's not spoken, but out-state they'll say too, in the rest other parts of the state rules, we can't support this student. If you lived in Madison, you were in Madison, they would have much better support for your students. And in districts like ours end up bearing the burden for the state, and it comes out of our ability to educate the rest of the students in the district. So we have to be careful with that. And that, I think, is why we have a recommendation from the administration to change this. It's, and like I said, it's heartbreaking. You certainly wouldn't want to have to make this decision, but we do have a financial responsibility to the students that are in our district. And I think having the flexibility to make these decisions could be of a great deal of benefit to us.
I appreciate your viewpoint, but I guess I strongly still feel against it. I think that we should look at other solutions. I mean, there's other options out there, and I think going back to the drawing board and seeing how we can keep our families together in our district.
But to Eric's point, these aren't families in our district. These are open enrollment students
Understood?
or that are open enrolling in or who have left the district, the families who moved out of the district, leaving this, and the student wants to
I
stay
don't
here.
think that's entirely fair, Peter, because the way that it happens, right, is that, so let's say you have a student who open enrolled starting in 4K or kindergarten, right? And so they're open enrolled, but ostensibly they're our student, like Dan just said, they're our student. And now their sibling is there and ready to join, 4K or 5K or first grade or whatever it is. Like that student, that sibling is our student, right? It's not like they're immediate, like they're open enrolled right now. We think about that all the time, like they're our student. And what we're saying is, if your sibling is a student with disability, you can't come here. Like, that's really how it's gonna manifest.
I'm not saying you
That's not
can't
what it's
come
saying.
here.
But it is what it's saying, because we never have open enrollment seats for special education. And so that's actually functionally how it will come down.
Saying that we
Because we
don't
can only-
guarantee the acceptance.
But we can only accept preferences, my understanding, we give preferences when we have seats that are open. And so if we have 10 seats that are open in kindergarten, let's say, and we have 12 people apply and 10 of those are siblings, just general education students, then those 10 students will get in. Let's say we have siblings that are all in third grade and we don't have any openings in third grade, there's no preference because there's no option to get in. And so even though I understand on paper, it says preference, the fact is that preference is based on the seats that we as a board allocate and open. And if we never have special education seats open, then students who are identified as needing special education can't benefit from the preference.
We have these open enrollment seats because they're financially beneficial to the school district. When we decide how many seats we're gonna have, and that's because the differential cost to put if you have a class of 20, to put a 21st student in there, the differential cost to us is less than the reimbursement we get or the transfer we get for that student. We only do that. We only do that because they improve the district's bottom line. Thank you, Krishna, you're improving our bottom line. And we want to make sure that we can, that's what we do with open enrollment. And we may, and that comes to siblings. And with all of the students, I think that has to be a part of the thought process, that it gets down to the bottom line. The best thing for students, by the way, is for this open enrollment students with the current funding formula is for the special education needs to be distributed as widely as possible across the state, the financial burden of that to be distributed as widely across the state as possible. That is in fact, I think, in the current circumstance, the best way to deal with the financial burden of these students. We should be, I'm not complaining about it, we should be educating these students. But it's only fair to our other students if we do our fair share.
Susan?
I would just like to add that prior to Peter and myself coming on this board, the previous boards accepted every single student who applied for open enrollment. And it was our impression, and it could have been different reasoning, that a large part of that was financial. And that's when Jared, as our Director of Business Services, put together a really great grid with the class size guidelines showing where we had space and didn't have space. At which point, open enrollment, space in terms of class size guidelines became a major factor in the decision of the number of students that would be accepted at what level. And we do that every year. We have a big grid. We say, we can take 4K students because we have room there, but we can't take any first graders in this building or second graders in this building. And we do a lot of study and a lot of analysis on that. So I want to make sure that the community understands that this board is very process-oriented and thoughtful about their acceptance in open enrollment students on an annual basis. And then we have a full grid that guides us in that direction. So the issue here is exactly what you're talking about, and many things that Elizabeth referred to, and that is, then do you also expand your open enrollment to siblings without looking at the grids and the numbers necessarily? And I agree with you. I think if you accept the family, sometimes it's problematic, and services are problematic, but it's part of what you accept.
You agree with Lorraine, but did you vote, you're saying policy committee voted 2-0 for this, correct?
I explained to you at the beginning that I voted for this policy in policy committee so that we could bring this to the board for full discussion. And the first comment I made tonight was, I do not support this policy. As a committee member, and I think I talked about that in our committee, and again, Elizabeth was very clear in her position on this as well, and actually abstained on her vote. But I wanted, if we had voted no on this, we would have had no board discussion.
Yeah, we agreed as a committee.
It wouldn't
that
have
it was
come to you at
important
all,
for board
and
discussion.
you wouldn't have had any input on this proposed change. It would have stopped effectively at committee.
As a former open enrollment student, I truly believe that our openness is critical into who we are as a district. And in this particular matter, I'm very concerned for families who, especially if they already have a son or a daughter who's enrolled in our district, and posing more regulations on them as to whether or not their siblings can apply. I think that is a significant issue that we are imposing on these families who might already have children in our district who by every means are full students and are able to take on the same opportunities and responsibilities as afforded to any other student who already lives within our district's borders. And so because of that, I would say that I am extremely hesitant, especially in regards to the debate concerning those of disabled persons. As a non-voting member, I do not believe that there is currently enough evidence or data to support any particular conclusion at this time. And I would certainly implore the board to, or the subsequent committees, to do more research into the matter to best assess how we can continue to be open and provide opportunities, especially to those who need such equitable practice like those disabled, while also supporting our bottom line and working for our current student body. So in that regard, I definitely think there needs to be more work and research done. But in regards specifically to allowing siblings to be a part of our district, especially those who already have students in our district, I think we owe them every responsibility to ensure that their processes remains as open and unfringed as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Krishna.
I was just gonna note that the history, when I started on this board, Madison was allowed not to allow students to open enroll out, so we actually didn't have that many student applications. This is one of the reasons we could pretty much accept everybody who applied, because it wasn't all that many students. And it was only, I've been here a couple of years when there was a legal case that changed that, and then now we have a situation where we have a surfeit of open enrollment students.
Eric and Elizabeth?
Well, I would just like to, remind the board that the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction does not doesn't recommend, they say that a pupil may be denied based on their disability. So that's from our state public instruction. There's a reason for that. And I can give you a vague example of my own experience of teaching for 24 years in another district in Dayton County, where I've seen this firsthand affect the services we deliver to the students in the district, because families will send students with great intentions because of certain services or programs that are available in one district that are not in another one. And those services can cause a drain on staff and resources and spots for students in that district. And there's been, in my experience, direct experience, a couple incidences where that has happened and then where we stopped doing that because of it. So my concern would be, again, we just heard all of our paraprofessionals talk about all the work they do and how scarce the resources are for students with disabilities in the district. I'd be really hesitant for our community and members that live here to take some of those things away when we know we can't provide it, so.
Elizabeth?
I want to respond to something that you said, Chris, which I don't usually do, but I think it's important around kind of like the evidence and the data. And I will say that, and this is because we had the benefit at policy committee to talk with Krista specifically about it. And so I think it's important for us to acknowledge that this was a difficult recommendation from administration as well, and it is incredibly thoughtful. And a question that I did ask Krista was like, what else, right? Kind of what other options there are. And so I want to kind of name that in your comments, just so that everyone is clear that it is thoughtful. It is kind of based in the real evidence that I think Krista, not to speak for you, Krista, but honestly, if I'm mischaracterizing, please speak up. But, the real feedback that she's getting from her staff, right, around how challenging and difficult it is. And so I wanted to be able to kind of be clear about that. So that's that part. The second thing is, Eric, I entirely agree with you. There's like nothing about what you said that I don't agree with. I 100% see it. I understand why the DPI rules and regs are the way they are. I have experienced students who are underserved in resident districts, moving into or opening and enrolling other districts. I've seen that go really poorly. I've also seen it go really well, right? Where kids are underserved in their resident districts and all of a sudden have, higher quality curriculum, more supports, all of those things. And the disability sort of suddenly isn't there anymore, right? And so I think that it kind of cuts both ways. My concern is not that. It's that if we make this policy change, we are explicitly privileging families that happen to not have students with disabilities. And we already know that students with disabilities are on the margins already. And so we are making a conscious decision to remove a benefit or a privilege on a group that already doesn't have a lot of privilege. And it's only from that angle. That's it. Because there's just no way, with the way that our open enrollment numbers have been historically since I've been on the board, that a sibling with a disability would benefit from our open enrollment preference. And that's where it comes from. But I don't disagree with anything that you said. And I don't disagree with Krista around how difficult it is either.
Susan?
And I think that's the other really major point that as a board we have to address, and that is the support that student services needs for personnel and the difficulty in those positions and the jobs that they do. And so that is also needs to be a major focus of this board. If Krista comes forward and talks about needs in her department, we need to provide full support.
I support that, Susan.
I can't help but feel a responsibility to our community and our constituents, though, who vote for us, that this could be a concern when we would be potentially making a decision not for those very constituents and people that are outside of our district who did not vote for us to be on board.
I agree, but Eric, I think what we're suggesting is having more support for the special ed department. So not taking away from our community, but making sure that we have the needed support at hand.
We can
There
always,
isn't any choice. We have limited resources.
here's the other deal, we can always limit the open enrollment numbers. I mean, if you're concerned about the provision of services, even though if you look at your sections, it looks like you can take 2 more students in a 6th grade class, we can decide not to do that.
Not under the
Yes.
current policy.
No, we can't.
The law requires us to accept all open enrollment unless we don't have space. And so that's where our policies are really important, as you mentioned earlier, that, and we can, when we do those projections, we can, reserve seats for, right now, we're growing, right, with our resident students. So we can reserve seats for resident growth, but we have to have a way to justify, those
Yes,
numbers
I
as
agree.
well.
I totally
Yeah.
support that.
But
Yes,
I do
agree.
agree with your premise that we can be perhaps a little more conservative with those estimates and limit the overall numbers. And that is absolutely a strategy that we'll implement.
Well, and maybe we look at other factors other than just class size, which has been our driver.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this obviously in January, but I think it's important you know now, right, because it impacts the policy. So we have to choose how much space we have by grade level. You can also make that determination by building. So for example, I'll tell you now, we're going to be making a recommendation by grade level, considering that Winnequa is full as a building. Regardless of any individual grades, we cannot take any more students in that building. So it is above capacity as a building. So that could be one of the factors. But at the other schools, if there are individual grades that were well below that class size goal, we have to open seats there. Yeah. And then I'm just looking at last year's, I don't have data right in front of me from the last several years, but we approved last year 4 seats for special ed students. It was for K-5 cross-categorical. I think in the past, we've had a few seats at times for speech and language services. Right now, our caseloads are higher than we want them as it is. So, I mean, the solution, right, is hiring more staff, which we're trying to do, of course.
Then you have to find them.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and the other good news piece of these comments is that one of the reasons people from other school districts are looking at our school district is the incredible high quality of the services that we provide.
Why we have a problem.
I know.
It's
I
expensive.
get it.
It's expensive to
That's why-
provide those services. I'm glad we
That's-
do
I
it.
know.
It's expensive to do
That's why I
this.
wanted us to discuss it as a board.
And how do we, and here's the thing, we want to be able to maintain those services for our resident students. That's what we need to do. We need to maintain those services. And this, I can see where the open enrollment could, certain circumstances, interfere with our ability to maintain that high quality of service. And yeah, it's a really difficult question. It's a really difficult problem.
That's why I wanted
Because
to
it's
hear
a
the
zero-
board
It's a
opinions.
zero-sum game. When we give more resources to one student, we take resources from another student. And right now, we're doing it to the tune of $2,000 per student.
I just want to, as far as the decision-making process, okay, part of the reason that we're bringing this forward now as an individual policy and not with the other updates is you have to decide in January as a board the number of seats. And if you are going to make a change to this policy, it really needs to happen, next month in December so that we go in January knowing what the policy is. And as we've talked about, it potentially could impact the number of seats that we'll recommend. With that. So that's where the timing comes in.
No other questions or comments?
Just process question around this. So, I guess this is the only one that we brought. So then this will be up for action and the other ones will be first read. So I answered my own question.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, me.
We're just preparing you for the first read of all the other policies we've been doing. Oh my gosh. I know. Michelle was a little surprised when she saw the list.
Policy, Rochelle.
All right, moving on to future meeting dates listed in board docs.
Personnel Committee's not on there because we just scheduled it. It's on 15th.
And can I have a motion for adjournment?
Second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried.
All right.
Meeting's adjourned.